Iannielli, and I'm a male to female transgender woman. And I had a pretty good day today. I actually went to a new therapist. Actually, I go to a few therapists. Currently seeing a woman therapist near my house in Hicksville. I live in Levittown. My therapist is in Hicksville, and she's allowing me to pay a reduced fee. I also see a therapist and a psychiatrist in the city at Beth Israel Medical Center as part of my ongoing treatment. And I've been going to a doctor and a therapist at Nassau University Medical Center, where I've been a patient also. And I'm also actually online with a therapist on the computer, and I'm going to an intake tomorrow for transgender individuals. So I have a pretty full plate, and I think it's all necessary in my continuing and evolving transition from male to female. One thing I learned when you're embarking on your transition, that you need a good support system, and I highly recommend that any transgender individual seek a good support system. It's very important and very necessary. I personally don't know where I would be without a good support system. So it certainly is very important that you get the right treatment. I'm also seeking gender reassignment surgery, so it's very important that I have continuity in my therapy, because if you are seeking gender reassignment surgery, in my case male to female, you need 2 letters from mental health professionals stating that you're of sound mind, and they approve you to go forward with the surgery. So I'm encountering some roadblocks in this juncture of my transition, but I'm working on concentrating in that area. Eventually I will seek to get the letters of approval. I'm actually working with my doctor at Callan Lord and a therapist there to write one of the letters, and I'm also trying to work with another therapist, and obviously my therapist and psychiatrist at Beth Israel, and I'm also online with a therapist that is working with me over the computer, so talking to a lot of people. But I think it's important. I mean, I've known that I was transgender, so to speak, since a very young age. Obviously I didn't know the terminology, but I knew I was different. And I knew it was just a matter of time when I would have to make a decision. And it happened to be later in my life, which I'm okay with, happy about, because it allowed me the opportunity to marry, and we have a son, a beautiful boy, 16 now. He's growing, and he's the pride of my life. So I'm very fortunate to have a family, a wife and a son, and I couldn't be happier. I've have some roadblocks in my life. I'm not working. I've been out of work for a couple of years now due to my breakdown, my medical challenges emotionally, and it hasn't been an easy road. And I'll be the first to tell you, speaking from experience as a transgender woman, that transitioning isn't easy at all. In fact, it's a very emotionally draining uh, process. Excuse me 1 second. I'll be right back. As I'm saying, transitioning is it's a very emotional, draining process, and you really have to know when it's the right time. I tried many times to figure out when that time would be right for me, and I really must be honest with you to tell you that it has been very hard in determining that, because when I was young I wanted to transition. I was high school age, 16, but it wasn't practical at that point for me, because I was living at home with my family, my parents, so I knew that it wasn't going to be possible, even though I truly wanted to transition at a young age. And ideally, that would have been a great time to transition, but, I knew it wasn't going to happen. And I also wanted to transition during college, but again, it wasn't the right time. And then work, and life just happens, and you get caught up, and you have to move forward. You can't just stop dead in your tracks. So I had to go forward and realize that it wasn't gonna happen at that point in my life. It wasn't the right time. I wasn't emotionally ready, but I knew I was gonna go in that direction at some point. And before I was a late bloomer. I didn't have a relationship with a woman. I was wanting to, I wanted to marry eventually and have a family, but I wasn't sure if it was going to happen. And, when I lost my mom, I was 29, and that was a very difficult time for me. And I kind of closed off, and I tried to figure out what direction my life was going to go in, and I was still at home with my dad, and I was very scared to go out on my own. I certainly was working. I went to college, I graduated, but I wasn't very independent. I was making my own way. I was making a living, but I was still at home, so I couldn't transition at that time either because I was with my dad. And eventually I was at an age where I felt like I wanted to either transition or meet somebody. And it was getting increasingly frustrating because I was getting older. And I was about 33 when I realized, look, I have to do something. So that's when I started going for therapy. And initially when I started, I was hoping that I would transition. That was my goal, but I was still in a very difficult situation because I was still living at home with my dad, and I couldn't tell my dad, I didn't feel comfortable telling him, and I didn't know how to tell him. I was the only boy born in my family. I grew up with two sisters, so certainly it would have been very difficult to tell my dad that, your son is really a girl, but, so it was hard. I didn't know what to do at the time. I was very mixed up. I tried to rationalize. I was desperate. I was also looking for support groups. The therapy was a head start. It was a start. And I remember driving to Connecticut, uh, learning about a support group for transgender individuals, and I never had gone to one before. And it was interesting to go. It was quite a distance actually. I, for some reason, didn't know of any in Long Island, and so I happened to drive to Connecticut to see one, and it was a very emotional day actually when I was driving to the center. It was in a church, but I remember when I was driving, there was a car accident, a very bad one, and it had just happened actually. I didn't see the accident itself, but I saw the aftermath, and it was horrible. All I remember was I saw a bunch of people laid out in the grass, and their car was flipped over. It was horrible. And I saw a mother clutching onto her baby, and others, members of the family, all strewn along this patch of roadway grass. And I didn't have a cell phone or anything, and I was dressed like a female. So my instincts told me I have to do something. So, the only thing I could do was I went to the next exit and pulled over and made a phone call to 911. And then I came back, I circled around to see, and then I felt better when I saw the emergency vehicles coming. So that's stuck in my mind, and it still sticks in my mind to this very day, because it was during my coming out in a way, and I saw this horrible tragedy. So when I went to the actual support group, I was shaken up, and what I thought was going to be an emotionally lifting experience, which turned out to be a very sad day also. And I just was hoping that those poor people were going to be okay. And it just made me realize how delicate life is. And, despite our struggles and how we feel about ourselves, life is truly precious. And you just never know if you're going to be here tomorrow. So that experience taught me a very important lesson about life and the fragile aspects of life. and I was heartbroken when I saw that. It was really, it was gut wrenching, and all I could do was hope that those poor people were going to be okay. Especially that mom clutching onto her baby. My God, that was really, that really shook me up. But when I was at the support group, we had to introduce ourselves. And, I didn't have a female name selected at that time. So I just said that I was trying to determine where my life was going to go, and that I identified as a girl, and I always had, but I was living as a male because that was where I was born. And I wasn't married at the time. I didn't have a girlfriend. So I was kind of focusing on my transgender and hoping to eventually transition. And I was seeking support. And I talked to a couple of the people there. I actually was talking to a a guy who actually was born a girl, but identified as a male and was transitioning completely opposite to what I was wanting to. She was, or he was, transitioning from female to male. And that was my very first experience in talking to a transgender individual. And I just thought it was ironic that the very first transgender individual person that I was talking to was the exact opposite of what I was. Because I was born male, but I was eventually hoping to transition to be female. So I thought that was kind of ironic. But I liked the person. I thought he was a nice guy. And we shook hands. And sadly, I never saw that person again because I never went back to the group. But I hope that he's happy and that he's living the life that he felt he should, just like I'm hoping to live the life that I feel I should, and also still maintain my family and the relationship that I treasure with my son. I don't look at being transgender as a bad thing. Certainly I know that there's a lot of misconception and a lot of misunderstanding about people who are transgender, and there's a lot of hatred and prejudice. I just saw a article on Facebook that was posted about 3 transgender women that were murdered in the past week and a half. So it is scary that people don't understand or accept us as people, and even inflict violence and brutally murder trans people, and it's horrendous. Because we're just people, really. We're just trying to live life the way we feel we should, and just because we're transgender doesn't mean that we're bad people. I don't see why we have to be condemned for who we are. I don't feel shame in admitting I'm a trans woman, and I want people to know. I don't care what people say or think. That's not my problem. That's their problem if they don't accept me for who I am. But I also realized that I have to be careful because you don't know the kinds of people out there. You can't just blindly trust people. You know, it's scary. And if I eventually wanted to have a relationship with a guy as a woman, you know, I don't know how they would react. You know, I don't want relationships anyway because I'm married and I have a wife and son. But, you know, if things changed and I was in a situation where I was looking for someone, I don't know how they would react to me if I came out and told them I was transgender. You know, men have a very um, sense of their own masculine uh, presence, and you know they don't want to have this fear that if they have feelings towards a transgender woman, that it's going to be perceived as feeling like they're gay, or you know, certainly a transgender woman is a woman. So if a male, normal heterosexual male, finds a transgender woman attractive and he wants to have a relationship with her, you know, it's okay. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. But there is some complications, however, if you're a pre-op transgender woman, and that's where the problems lie. If you're not honest with someone, especially a man, and he has feelings for you and you're transgender and you're preoperative, you know, all kinds of things could happen that, you know, you just don't know. So you really have to be careful. I don't personally see relationships as all that important to me, aside from the relationships that I already have. Sure, I want to have friendships, and sure, it would be nice to have a guy like me for who I am, and to respect me as a female. Sure, I would love that. You know, it's taken me a long time to get to this point in my life and to feel comfortable. And, you know, I've been on female hormones now for about 2.5 years, and they do make a difference. They have given me the confidence that I need to go out in public and present myself as a woman. And, you know, people see me as a woman. They don't question it now, so I'm happy about that. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to get to that level of comfort. But I'm getting there, you know? And also, when I wanted to transition earlier, I experimented. I went down to a gender identity clinic in Virginia. I went to school in Virginia. So, years later, I went back down there hoping to transition, and I found some clinic that were known for gender reassignment surgery, and I was curious. You know, I was curious how much it would cost. You know, and I was experimenting, but it wasn't a good time for me to consider transitioning because I was still at home with my father, and I was still kind of at a crossroads in my life. I wasn't sure if I wanted to transition or to meet a girl and marry, so I was going through quite a lot emotionally, And I was very shy as a person, and I didn't date much, so I was very introverted. And I always wondered if I was going to meet a girl, and if I did, how I would, handle my transgender situation. I really didn't know, and I was afraid to tell a girl that I was transgender, because I didn't know how she would react, And then I started seeing a therapist in Queens. I was working in the city, so I would go to the therapist in Queens, and we talked about life and my experiences, and I told her about my mom dying young, and that I was at home living with my dad, and that I, was very shy, and I also told her about my transgender feelings. I don't know if I knew the word transgender at that time, but I told her that I had a gender identity conflict, and that I didn't feel comfortable in my male body, that I felt like a woman trapped in a male body, and you know, talked about that, and tried to see how to integrate those feelings that I had. And I also talked about, you know, the pain that I felt losing my mom, and never being able to tell her the truth about how I felt. And, I told her about the relationship I have with my father, and was concerned for him because of his depression and his drinking problem. And I knew that seeing my dad, that I knew to stay clear of alcohol. I was very fortunate that I never had a drug or alcohol addiction problem. Um, the only thing that I had growing up was the gender identity conflict, and the lonely isolation that I felt. And the only things that really helped me was my love of sports and my discipline in school. I was a good student, and I was very good in math and science, and I had that desire to study physics and calculus in college with the hopes of becoming an engineer. So I had pretty good ambitions, and I learned to do well in school from my parents. They encouraged me, so I never had problems in that regard. But I didn't really know how to assert myself and how to deal with my internal struggles.